snowy day in central Saskatchewan, Canada, and I am joined with some colleagues who has some experience with this thing I'm going to talk about, and I just asked them if they wouldn't mind coming in for a conversation. So I would just ask everybody to say hello. So I'll pass the baton over to my good friend Brian Lamb. Hello, Brian.
Hello, Alan. Thanks for letting me join. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of Tecumseh, Teshquetmik in Secwepemc Ulu. In settler terms, that is Kamloops. And I work at Thompson Rivers University.
Excellent. And we'll hear a lot about TRU throughout this series. And also, I was so excited when Ken Simpson responded to my request for this, because he has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today. Hello, Ken. How are you?
Hello. Fine. Nice to see everybody. And nice to meet Daniel, whose connections we've explored a little bit. I'm coming to you from Montreal, and Daniel, let's hear about you.
Hello, thank you for the invite. My pleasure. Well, I'm Daniel. I work at Coventry University. I think I am the only one connecting from this side of the pond. So good afternoon from England. Yes, I'm quite excited to talk about the things that we have done around the SPLOTs, how we have been working with Alan, kind of refining, or sometimes it feels like a kind of taking advantage and pushing something that was perhaps designed for one purpose, and then trying to push the boundary a little bit to adapt to our needs.
Excellent, and thank you, Daniel. Yeah, during the pre-show. It turns out Ken has been to Coventry and is interested in going to Seville, where Daniel is from. So,
and I have met Brian in Seville.
Oh, really?
See, everything's cross-connected here. So I don't know if anybody is actually watching this, but I just want to have this conversation, and we can't help but begin this with a little bit about. Have to drop the acronym and say what the SPLOT is. So I don't know. Should I let you do the origin story, or maybe we should hear from Ken or Daniel? But Brian is responsible, totally responsible, right?
I could tell maybe the backstory, and then actually it quickly moves to Ken and Daniel, because they were part of the story very quickly after. It was when Alan was doing a fellowship at Thompson Rivers University, and it was relatively early for me. So we were still trying to establish any kind of open publishing platform environment. We didn't have a WordPress service at the time that was fairly robust. And I was bemoaning to Alan some frustration that there were kind of two very common problems we'd run into with people that were new to open publishing or open collaboration. And one was just the complexity of the tool. If people just wanted to get up and working and writing, that they had to learn WordPress, which is, not, it for those of us that use it all the time, it may seem intuitive, but to new users, it frequently isn't, especially if all they want to do is write something. And then the other issue was privacy concerns. At the time, we didn't have a locally hosted solution, so I was on an external service. So student privacy and student data was a concern. I didn't have a privacy impact assessment done. So we wanted to protect data. We didn't want to collect it. So I was kind of bemoaning those two issues. And then Alan remembered that a colleague at another institution, Tom Woodward, had done some interesting work using form-based authoring. And that just seemed like a really great idea. So Alan started working away, and then really, my only contribution to the process is one time when we were talking, I thought, I think I have an acronym, and I said SPLOT, and I didn't really quite know what it meant, and we've said different things, but it was something like simplest possible learning online tool or toolkit.
That's one of the possible interpretations.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember Alan going, "Come on, man! Like acronyms are goofy," and then he got back to work.
But that's some of the beauty of it, is like it can mean many things to many people. And so it was just a fantastic opportunity for me to spend those 4 and 5 months in Kamloops working with Brian and other faculty, and we did a number of things. But really kind of like some of it was driven very early by conversations and what Brian relayed me that Ken was doing in teaching English courses where students maybe had to publish 1 or 2 essays and the hurdles about getting them accounts on WordPress and then like having to get them over the barrier of the interface. And so can you tell a little bit more about what you're doing at that time, Ken?
Yeah, what strikes me as I try to remember or to reconstruct what I think happened back then is how incrementally things grew. I first met Brian, for example, as I was exploring how to put a project in a Utopia course online. And that project was WordPress based. And one of the problems we had was tracking down students to get them to sign waivers and things like that. And then after that course, we tried different kinds of blog environments. I never actually did ask students to publish essays on the class blog. It was strictly sort of creative. What I was trying to do was develop a form of writing that wasn't as formal as the standard critical essay in response to literature. What I wanted them to do was to write more informally and embed images and hyperlinks and things like that in their writing in response to their reading. So the more standard essays, I had them hand in as we normally would. But the first time we did the blogs, we still had the problem of privacy. So we still had to get everybody in the class, and we're talking sometimes 35 people, to sign waivers and things like that. And I think this was happening while you, Alan, and Brian were working in the background on a better solution. So it was kind of intersecting. And then the following year, I think this is like 2015 or 2016, we finally arrived at the point where the privacy issues had been solved. My needs for a different kind of form in which where students could respond to the literature, that was kind of solved. And we also managed to, or I also managed to avoid Moodle, which I really wanted to do. So all the splots, the true writer splot, helped to solve all of those problems. And then in the ensuing years, students just got more and more sophisticated using it. We had workshops with Brian on GIFs and embedding different headers and things like that. So it just sort of grew incrementally and got to the point where it was really quite exciting. And then I retired. So end of narrative.
Thanks a lot, Ken. It's great to hear that because those conversations were very pivotal when I started. So I'm going to go quickly just to show you pretty quickly the resources I published for this. I decided, well, why not publish them in the TRU Writer? And this is the site that initially Brian and I created to sort of test things out, but make it available. So the idea is that you have everything that we like about the media publication ability of WordPress. So nicely formatted text. You've got embedded media. and all these things. But to author this, you never have to see the innards of WordPress, which I don't mind dealing with. But for students or people, you may just want to submit a quick piece of writing or commentary. Why do you have to throw them through the hurdle of logging in and going into the place? Plus, the way we're able to do this, and I'm just going to go right now at the top of this site, I've got this link to write. This is the form. And so what we've done is we've taken the things that you do in authoring a WordPress post. You have a title, but in this case, you get to choose how you want to list yourself as the author. So the default is anonymous because we don't want to force people to identify themselves. So people can choose how they represent themselves. And then we have the editor, and this is where you do your writing. So you get rich media, you can upload images. An experiment that worked out really well early on that Brian and I did, you can copy paste directly from MS Word or Google Docs, and it will preserve just about all the standard format of headings, footers, etc. So you don't have to compose in here. And so you can add a header image. Recently added, I've made it so that there's alternative description for the images because that's important for accessibility. Captions, so that when you're using images, part of the things that was important for us is that you give credit to the source from. So we encourage people, again, but not required, that you list the source. Categories, tags. The email address, again, is optional. It's not forced here. And this is because later it came up that when people submit things, they realize they need to make a change. So later I added a feature where if you want to enter your email address, you can get an email with the link, but also if you don't enter your email address, you still get a special link when it's published that you can save and you can go back to at any time. So it's a form-based front end for doing WordPress authoring. And what I've done, let's see if I can log in really quick, just to show you for the site owner. This is basically in WordPress, it's a child theme, meaning that it takes all the capabilities and formatting of the parent theme, which is called Radcliffe by my favorite WordPress designer, Anders Noren. And so this is what we want to like save students and people who want to like submit writings to your site from seeing this kind of like haphazard interface and knowing where do I write, et cetera. So we wanted to kind of simplify this, but for the person who puts this site up, over time, we've added quite a few more features, but you can put an access code. So if you want to make it so everything is published immediately, but say for a class, you can say like, you have to enter this access code to see the form. So it's a weak password. And then there's certain pages set up. I think maybe I just heard a little blip that Grant is here. So I'm adding Grant Potter. Welcome, Grant.
Hello. Sorry I'm late.
That's okay. No apologies. I said it was going to be informal. So I'm just inside. I'm showing people the interface for customizing your various features. So someone who sets up their own WordPress sites can say like, if I want, I can make it moderated. That means everything that comes in is saved as a draft and I can get an email and that way I can sort of use it with an approval process. Or you can publish immediately to the site, and that's where you may want to use the access code. You can disable comments. You can even set a minimum number of words you want people to use. Later, I always like the header images in this theme, and someone wrote me and said, wait a minute, you said this was the simplest thing to use to write. Why do you force me to create an image? So you can make the header image optional, not used or required. And on and on and on. There's a lot of ways to customize this. Most importantly, and this came actually from a conversation that we're going to get to talking to Daniel soon at Coventry University. They were using a different one of these splots, but this issue came up for these forms that I had set up because I had basically hard-coded all of the labels for the forms and the descriptions, and it's taking a little bit longer to load here. So I'm going to bop out of here. And so what I came up with is the idea that I'm going to visit the site right now and see if this works. Using the WordPress Customizer, which is a thing that lets you use through an interface to be able to modify the writing form, because there was a certain class where my instructions maybe weren't the best for people to understand. So what this can do is to say for this writing form, I can come over here and it allows me to change I can change this prompt at the top here. I can change the labels for the title field. So article name, see how bad I type. So this allows you to more or less customize the labels and the instructions for all these fields, which lets you tailor it more for your particular publishing needs. So a lot of things have gone on with this have evolved over years as people have used it and made suggestions. I use it a lot myself, and and then I find, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really work. It's been a nice thing that here we are almost 7 years later, Brian, and people are still making some use of it. Every time I start to think that these will go away or that they're passe, someone shows me something that they've been using with it. I like to stop me talking and hear some other people share some of their experiences. But, as a conference, this is an open publishing thing. And so, to me, this is publishing very loosely. But, to me, I've seen people and I've used it for publishing things that look like journals or looks like collections, but also for creating open sites where you can invite the world or particular communities to contribute to a larger piece. So to me, that's all aspects of publishing. Maybe I'll just send it over to Daniel to sort of pick it up, because Daniel and his crew at Coventry University sort of have really taken to these splots, and a lot of the features that you saw came from their suggestions. So what's a splot, Daniel? How do you explain it to people in the UK?
Well, actually, because the case we introduced the splots was in conjunction with our domain of one's own initiative. So we had to explain what domain of one's own was, and on top of that, what the splot is. So it was a double challenge. But it has been, it has been really useful to us. And in case of the writer in particular, I don't have much experience with that type of or typology of splot, but we have used, for example, to convene a conference. And I guess that's a good example of open publishing, because it was a small scale conference, and what we did was to ask people to submit the abstracts and then to develop the full content using that platform. I think that the one that we have explored the most is the collector, the true collector, which was designed originally to create a collection of images, but we wanted to kind of push the envelope and use it for other purposes. And I think that's in that context we started to have these conversations about how to modify certain things. One particular use was to create directories of people. For example, people attending conferences or people in a class. So instead of asking people to share images or of anything, the image that we were expecting them to share was a portrait, and then the title of the post was their name. And I think that's how we entered this kind of a territory of having to change something that had been created for a different purpose. We have used it for also asking people to draw things in workshops, like mind maps. I think that directories is probably the one that we have used more often. And then something which was also quite helpful was to, at some point, it was always very useful to have this option to allow people to post without having to give away any personal data. At the same time, we found other contexts where it was helpful for us to make sure that people were including their email address. But at some point, you added this possibility to restrict the domain name. So only people with a university email address of our institution were able to contribute. And we were making sure also that they were using their university email address as opposed to a personal email address.
Yeah, so many ideas. I mean, in some ways, it's the same capabilities. Like the writer was really revolved around producing something that's mostly text with media, and then the collector kind of revolved around some needs that some colleagues of Brian were doing, where they're doing a workshop in teaching good use of open license images. So they wanted a way for people to share the images that they found. But pretty much it's still around building a public collection of different kinds of media. And so, Daniel's, I saw like, I don't know if it inspired, but like for the alt conference one year, they have people do this social bingo thing where they use it for people to create their introductions. And it gives people the flexibility to share their image or not, to use a picture of their cat or dog. And just share what they want about themselves. And, there's like 100 uses. And
the random function was quite useful for that, because then we encourage people to click on random and then establish connections with people that they had not met before. Do you want me to share some links using the chat? I don't know if the chat is being recorded somehow, but it could be useful, I guess.
Yeah, I can push any links out that you need. And I'd also like to hear, from Brian and Grant, because they support faculty at other institutions that make use of this. And we also see a lot of interesting things going on at the Open EdTech Collaborative, Open ETC, where every now and then someone comes up with some impressive uses of these writing or publishing tools. I still think it's publishing per se, right?
Yeah, we haven't heard from Grant, so I'll give him the first opportunity. But yeah, we use it tons.
Yeah, well, we've used it at University of Northern British Columbia in some science classes, in particular in biology classes, at the prompt of an instructor who wanted a very easy way for students to share some of their end of semester writing. So there's been, there's an animal behavior class, and these are fourth year biology. So these are undergraduate students in their fourth year, as well as an insects, fungi, and society course in molecular cell physiology. And there were the instructor wanted two things. They wanted just an easy way for students to share some of their work publicly. And they had a desire to share some of the student writing with other institutions, with colleagues at other institutions. So the SPLOT became this perfect way for the students to do that. And one thing that I was notable for me in conversation with that instructor is, with the two instructors, is the prompts that the SPLOT will give you with regards to attribution, because some of the students had no idea what those prompts were. Like they thought, well, could you come to the class? So I ended up getting a request. Can you come to the class and talk to them about this thing, what the attribution is and why they should do it? So there was a whole other level of student learning that took place outside of the content itself. That's around how to publish on the web, how to, indicate to your readers where you're maybe getting your images from, or where you may be getting some of the media that you're using in your writing. So it was that was an unforeseen benefit of using that model.
Yeah, excellent. I'm like, every time I look around, there's another biology one from UNBC, and it's interesting because sometimes it looks like some of the assignments are like writing like the typical things you expect in a class, like a little essay or a paper on a particular subject, but also it's sometimes a little bit more creative, like it's more about where this is situated in the world. And so to me, the best part is that people take this in directions that I would have never anticipated. And that's the beauty of this sort of personal publishing, is that people can see the potential for doing this. And again, I want to turn it over to Brian because he's seen and been part of a lot of these implementations.
Could I just add something to that, Brian, before we get to you? What I found too, from the writer's point of view, is that I think I have no sort of research to back this up, but anecdotally at least, I think writing improved because students had a very clear purpose and audience. They were aware that they were writing for each other, not just student and instructor. So I think that's a real benefit of this kind of writing.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, I just was going to say, just to build a little bit on what Grant and Ken were saying, it's kind of become our default course blogging tool, which has really allowed us to really increase the adoption of course blogging, because we can quite comfortably say there's going to be very little pain involved with your students doing this. Typically, if we were going to have a course blog, we would probably need at least one training workshop to show students how to author. Whereas now, usually it's just a 5-minute demo, which last year, since we went teaching remotely, I've made it into an asynchronous video. And it's very rare to get a support request. So that's one of the beautiful things about the tools that Alan's built. They're very solid and, very low stress. So yeah, and then we can use them also for building out resources. So I shared in the chat the example of one called Critical Analysis of Images. That was a tool that we had an instructor who wanted to teach about, applying a critical lens to the imagery of advertising, things like, gender representation, racial representation, representations of consumption, things like that. But and they wanted to make the resource open. What we quickly ran into was, if we wanted to do this as an OER project, how do we get the rights to redeploy these images? And, we had some discussions. We thought, well, if there's critical analysis happening, we probably have a fair dealing issue, but that people were concerned. Well, would we be able to apply an open license to the result? So after a lot of back and forth, we kind of hit on the ideas. Well, if the students generate their own images, we can get around that. So essentially, we created this database where students went out into the community, and of course, advertising's all around us, and that became an interesting exercise in itself. Sending students into the community and opening their eyes and being able then to take the images they were capturing in the community that they live in and redeploying them back into the space for critical analysis of images. Another nice example of that too is, just keep in mind too, even though Alan has developed SPLOT tools that are kind of more geared to media, the writing tool uses media quite well. So, a video blog we've had going through a tourism instructor here, Dr. Kathleen Scherf, has the students, capturing, essentially putting together little travel vignettes along with videos, usually of the region, but also places people have been, essentially practice for communicating travel writing as they would be doing it later. And again, that's where the authenticity of blogging really is powerful. And it's easy to forget that because people don't blog as much as they used to. But, when the students know that they're posting something that's going to be seen on the web, that, that they'll be able to find on Google, that they get feedback from unexpected. It's very powerful to get a comment from someone you've never heard of from another place, even if it's just 1 or 2 comments. It's such an incredible thing when you come back to check in with the students and they'll say things like, I got a comment from someone, in Europe who had been to this same place and they showed me this and they added this to that. And the site works very, very well for embedding media. So yeah, those are just, a couple of the examples. It really has become along with, the tools we have on our site, that our multi-site that Alan helped us set up and that we have on the Open ETC with Grant, we can deploy these these tools really quickly too. We can provision them in a matter of 5 minutes. So from the point of view of an under-resourced and over-ambitious learning technology team, these tools really fit in well because we want to extend practice as much as we can and get as many people involved in doing things as we can. But you know, we only have so much time. We can't provide a boutique experience for everybody. So having these relatively simple off-the-shelf tools that we can deploy quickly, people pick up more or less on their own, and then we really don't hear from them again, except for them to go, "Hey, did you see this cool thing we did?" Really is the effort to reward ratio is just very beneficial to us.
Thanks, Brian. I hadn't seen Kathleen's travel spot. That's really great.
And one cool thing about that is it's gone over a period of years. So we actually, if you look at that, you know, you can actually see the evolution of the site over years, which helps the students because when they want to, well, what do I got to do? You got 3 years of examples here to look at.
Yeah. And yeah, I never added from the beginning, obviously from the context we're talking about. We're all involved in higher education, but you know, I try to find examples, and it's certainly not limited to that. And so I have seen people like take it for doing like some personal note taking, or some people have built. I've seen a couple sites, and I made one too, where people were sharing their pandemic experiences. And so the anonymity there is the capability to allow people to write just how they feel, something really quick. And that's one of the things that have satisfied me as a person who kind of just assembles this and then, you know, freaks out when someone says it doesn't work. But for the most part, it does. And maybe that's a question to put out there. Like, I'm so familiar with this. I can, you know, I do these in my sleep, and I can go in there. Like, is it pretty straightforward for people to get these things configured and set up?
Well, one of the things that's different about the tools you built, Alan, and I'm sorry to keep talking, but I do think this is important. There are other ways to get these effects, right? There are tools like Gravity Forms, which can allow you to do form-based authoring tool set. And those are great tools, and we use those for some applications as well. But I remember, Alan, you made it a real priority for you that you wanted the splots that you built and the splots that are at splot.ca to be completely open and free for anyone who wanted to run them. And, you know, that means you're deploying everything through the theme, which is a subtle thing, and to some people maybe a strange thing, but it does make it a lot more accessible. It means that when people from other institutions say, wow, how do you do all these splots? How do you deploy them? That's great. It's literally just a theme. You go to GitHub, you install it in your theme directory, and then you've done a really nice job of documenting it and going through the steps of doing it. So I think anyone who's, you know, remotely comfortable with configuring anything can do this really easily. For someone who's never done it before, yeah, that's where a technologist or a support person might need to go, okay, this is the area. Do you want a password or not? You know, and you ask them the basic questions and kind of just walk them through that step. And that's usually a half-hour conversation. And it's usually a pleasant conversation because you're having a conversation then with either the instructor or the coordinator of the project. It's like, what do you want to do? How do you want to interact with the people? How open do you want to make this? How much control do you need? Do you want to have this affordance added to the authoring process? Which to me is just a good conversation to have.
Yeah, I mean, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Okay. I mean, at that stage in 2014 or 2015 or whatever, I mean, basically I knew nothing, but Brian's right. In half an hour, he taught me how to set up the class blog and to be able to explain to students how to author. So, I mean, it's super easy.
Thanks, Ken. And Brian's right. Like when I started making these, I wanted to like not rely on anything that you had to pay for. And so I wanted not to like be relying on specific plugins. Some places like the writer, like there's an option to use the reading time plugin, which some people like, but that's not really like required for the functionality. There was a moment early on. I know our colleague Pat Lockley said, like, well, why don't you do this as a plugin so it can work on anything? And I got really close with the Splot writer, and I keep thinking to come back to that because there are certain instances where you'd like that functionality in any other theme. But as Brian said, it became pretty direct for me to be able to incorporate all this into the WordPress theme itself. So all you need to do is install a parent theme, which gives it its format, and then the Splot theme, which gives it its functionality. And there's a lot of flexibility built into that. Ironically, in the beginning, the way I got around being able to upload media, especially with the collector, is that there was like, you didn't know it, but you were logged in secretly as a guest user that just had the ability to access the media thing in WordPress that allows you to upload media. And it worked, but it was a little bit convoluted, and it presented some implications for like multi-site instances. And I just wanted to figure out a way around that. So I finally did, years later, figure out a way. And it's just to be able, the only reason for that was to give you access to the thing that allows you to upload an image to WordPress. And so the current versions of the Splot themes have kind of gotten away from that reliance. And again, like I'm just happily pleased to see that people make use of it. I wonder, like, will people, because they have to get, hosting for WordPress or access to a place like they have at TRU in Coventry, where either through a domains project or through a multi-site, some of this is built in. I always said in my documentation that this will not work on freewordpress.com, and it doesn't. But I had a colleague, Cheryl Cullen, back at Maricopa Community Colleges, where I started, who actually you can get your upgrade on WordPress.com to like a business package or something like that. And it's a little bit more than a domain, but for some people that was reliable. And in that instance, you can actually upload custom themes and plugins. So it's not totally out of the range to have that hosted solution, but it's really aimed at people who can go to the step of setting up their own domain or having access to some of these tools. I'm babbling a lot. I don't know, again, whether, I've provided on some of the documentation. I splotted this, a lot of the examples that come from the folks here and beyond. I don't know, maybe give me some ideas. What should I do next? Like, is there something else? Oh, Daniel, look how quickly he's reacting. I think
I was on mute. No, I was meaning to ask if you are considering any other themes for a future new Splot. I mean, you are covering pretty much anything right now with and they are now converging as well, because you could use them for anything. But I was wondering if you are thinking of any new themes.
Not really. I just heard a ding. I thought maybe someone shut up. I build a lot of these from my favorite theme designer, Anders Noren, because his themes are relatively simple. In some cases, I worry about the future of the front end editor, because that's really the old, the classic WordPress editor. I haven't seen any problem with that. So, like, when you publish something and you look at it as a WordPress site, yeah, you can get into the block stuff, but I don't necessarily see the block editor becoming available, but maybe it will. So that's a consideration. And so, yeah, I mean, he does have some new themes, and that's why I was kind of, yeah. And he's very generous with providing these themes for free. So I don't know if like a theme has necessarily driven. I've always it's been a while since I actually did a new one. I kind of like combined several of the features of the collector, which is really built around images, and the writer into the Splot box to be sort of like to do a lot of things with media. But some cases that might be just a bit too big of a multi-purpose tool, but it's the idea almost anything you can embed as a media form can go into there. No, but if you say like, wow, it'd be nice to see something built around this theme. I honestly like have less time now to focus on some of this, so I haven't really sat down to carve out something new. I'm kind of trying to think what other functionalities would be good to do in sort of this environment. And not to say like I've created everything that covers everything, because I certainly haven't. But most of the times the ideas for these didn't come from me; they came from other people talking about the things that they're doing.
I guess you might point out too that in the very, very early days of the splots, they weren't necessarily the kind of tool the way we think of it now. I think the very first splot tool you did was a tool for uploading 2 images and then having an image slider for the before and after effect, which later got done by H5P. So I think you've either mothballed it. We don't see it very much anyway, put it that way. But the idea really was it didn't necessarily have to be about building websites. Like we were really thinking of it as a term of like simple as possible and not collecting data. Those were really the 2 rules, and that almost any kind of learning or web activity that you would want to do. I mean, we're educators, so in a teach and learn environment, but there's nothing specific about education necessarily in the tools. Could be a splot, but it was just clear from adoption and the kind of things that we saw, and then where the success was, and the energy from the community and people in other places picking up and using them became kind of how we think of splots now.
Yeah, and people said, and like I question myself, like they're not necessarily always WordPress. I kind of made a GitHub based one, using that animation thing that we have on the splot.ca site. And I never really finished it out, but I thought it could be done in a way that it's just driven by, like a JSON data file somewhere. And so that's really limited use, something that comes up and takes an acronym and like plays with the name of it. But I also think like platforms like glitch.com is like, that's just Splot City. And basically you can take anything that's published there. It's really easy to publish, and you can make a copy of it and then run it yourself. And so it kind of took the old tools that was in, you remember Mozilla Thimble, that kind of made it easy to understand web pages and sort of turn it into like a bigger sort of almost app-based environment. So I'm really think that covers a lot of things, and I love what they do. And that's another thing I just wish I had more time to poke my head into.
Well, the collector tool looks really interesting to me because it would have been very useful when I was using them, when I was still teaching. That came along a little bit later, but I've been trying to sort of follow the development of what you've been doing, and that seems to me to be a very useful thing that I and my students could have used way back when.
Right. I was just thinking of there's a faculty member. Where's it? Jessica McFarland. She's at JIBC, Brian. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. She's doing a lot of these classes where her students are doing hand-drawn comics, and she collects them into this TRU collector Splot organized thing. And some of the conversations with her led me to add some features to deal with image alternative description. So now you can make it required on these sites. And also a couple things is being able to provide access to be able to see all the works, because she actually has her students, and this is kind of creative. She has her students each use a specific cryptic tag that she knows to identify their work. So it's a way that she as an instructor can see all of a particular student's work in one screen. but there's a lot of activity there. I was just looking at some of the ones on Open ETC, and I don't know who did the fungi lab, but there's 999 pictures of mushrooms and other assorted fungi.
That's at SFU, and I think Jason Toll had some role in it, at least in helping them get them rolling.
Yeah.
I also like one of the other things I saw was the publication of student writing in a journal kind of format at I'm pretty sure it was at True. One of the things I wanted to do just at the end of my tenure at True was to establish a student collection of essays on a yearly basis, so that students could see their work being published. I mean, maybe at the upper level, what I suggested was at the upper level, you could select the best essay, for example, and collect all of the best essays from each upper level class, and create a kind of journal for students to see their work collected even more. But I never actually got around to that. But it looks like somebody, if I remember correctly, has created a student writing journal of some sort, and that seems to me to be a kind of very, very useful sort of extension of what the True Writer, what you can do with True Writer in terms of student publishing.
Yeah, I have an example that I've used, but when I was at TRU, we worked towards the end. They have an undergraduate research journal, and we were working with them to publish that. And I played a little bit around because there was a journal that was published there, the Small Cities, that was through the Open Journal platform, which I understood is very complex to deal with. And so I did some prototypes that could be done with that. But the things that Daniel did in terms of using the writer for collecting conference proposals, for session proposals, kind of uses it as a real simple kind of like management system. So people submit things as drafts, and then whoever's the editor who has access to the WordPress site can review and decide which ones get published, and then that becomes the public record. In the some of the classes that I taught with my colleague Mia Zamora at Kane University, each year we had students do final projects, and so we would publish them in this TRU Writer format issue, each with a different theme. So this would be the way they posted their final projects, sort of like a collection of essays, if you will. And so these are all ones that students have written some speculative fiction about the future. And so I like the journal like approach to sort of like these final projects, and then they become public information.
Exactly. Yeah, it sounds really good.
So I really appreciate people coming in here and talking about this stuff. It still kind of surprises me that this can have some legs, and I'm ready to try to do things. Daniel, throw me your ideas. Ken, Brian, Grant, and I get highly motivated when a good idea comes in, and that's where all of these came from. I can't really say. The one that Brian talked about, the image comparison, that was like the first thing I experimented with just to figure out some of the mechanics. And certainly all these other ideas turned out to be quite a lot better. So we'll just give our big SPLOT wave.
I want to thank you, Alan, for building these, and and I know how responsive you've been to the community. Like, those aren't empty words. What you just said, that example you showed of that instructor with the hand drawings, I remember she wrote me saying, "Oh, I love the SPLOT tool, but could I get it to do this, this, and this?" And I was like, "Who's this person even asking? We're giving them a free tool, and they're making demands. What's the matter with this person?" So I did send it to you because I thought, well, it shouldn't be my decision to make, but I was kind of doing it apologetically. And then sure enough, within 2 days, Alan had updated the tool to incorporate the feature that was requested.
Well, thank you. I mean, quite often, I mean, what she asked for wasn't terribly complex. And so it's like, if I can sit down in about half an hour and see if I can get a prototype working, I don't do extensive testing. I kind of like test it on my local site. I put it on splot.ca, and then I let the instructor or whoever asked for the feature. So I kind of get highly motivated when those questions come in, maybe to the detriment of other things I'm supposed to be doing. And there's always a little bit of a balancing act of trying to figure out whether there was, I can't remember, was something she wanted was very specific to her course. It's like, this has to be something that doesn't interfere or change the functionality, and also could be used or not used in anybody's site. So I can certainly do these things. If it was my own site, I could customize it to do anything. And to me, that's been the fun part of this, is like, how do you make it generalizable? And the things, again, from Daniel's colleague Lauren, that came in for the collector, to make it so you can change the fields and the descriptions on the form entry. To me, it was a real game changer, because it gives people the flexibility to make it really fit the people that they're trying to build their site to work with. And so, like, I mean, I can tell sometimes when people don't know about the customizer, because it still has all my defaults in there, which is fine. But to me, that was a really nice discovery that we could do that.
Yeah, I'd just like to second what Brian had just said. We have Alan to thank, I think, mainly for being so flexible to all of the little adjustments that need to be made by students, by projects that are being developed, and so on. I mean, the way that it's sort of the splots have grown over time has been really interesting, in the way that you've been able to sort of very flexibly change things and add things and develop things. So I really enjoyed looking at and observing, I guess, how things have developed.
Well, thank you, Ken, and I'm quite humbled, and I appreciate everybody's kind words. And this has really been maybe one of the highlight projects I've ever worked on. And cheers to the Fox and Hound, where the Splot was originated with.
Really?
with Brian, when it was literally, I think, the second night I had arrived, when he said we were talking about what I would work on, and he lobbed the acronym on me, and we tease each other, but I really love that moment, and it sort of inspires me, as like, that's how this tech stuff should be, is where we can brainstorm these ideas and get to tinker with them.
I thought for sure it would have been the Noble Pig.
Well, there are other meetings held there.
For sure.
Is there a plaque there at that table?
I've been demanding that they commemorate the table. I periodically, I haven't quite got that much pull there yet.
Well, we'll hold out, and hopefully I'll be able to get back there soon and see the plaque. Thank you again, everybody, for dropping in on the session, and anybody who actually might be watching, it's all fine. All this stuff is at splot.ca, and thanks for tuning in, and I'm going to end the broadcast.